In 2023, one of the most powerful entertainment companies on the planet watched a 26-year-old woman from Thailand walk away from their contract, and there was nothing they could do about it. She didn't need them. Not for distribution, not for marketing, not for money. Because in the years leading up to that moment, she had quietly built something that no record label, no A&R executive, no music industry veteran had a playbook for. A global empire that operated by rules they hadn't written and couldn't control. Her name is Lisa. And the numbers she was putting up weren't just impressive. They were an indictment. What we're going to show you today is why that terrified them, and why it should matter to every person who has ever bought a concert ticket, streamed a song, or believed that talent alone is enough. To understand why Lisa's story shook an industry, you first have to understand that the global music business is not one industry. It's two. And for most of the last century, those two worlds have barely spoken. On one side, the Western music industrial complex, built in the mid-20th century on radio airplay, physical record sales, and a distribution model that requires artists to sign away portions of their masters, their touring revenue, and their creative control in exchange for the machinery of promotion. It's a system that made Universal, Sony, and Warner into some of the most powerful corporations on Earth. It made stars. It also made contracts. On the other side, the Korean entertainment industry, specifically the K-pop ecosystem. A model that on the surface looks similar, agencies, contracts, artist development, but that runs on an entirely different fuel. Not passive consumption, active participation. Fans don't just listen. They organize. They mobilize. They spend. The Korean wave, known as Hallyu, has been building for 2 decades. By the early 2020s, it had become impossible to ignore. BTS was performing at the United Nations General Assembly. Korean films were winning Academy Awards. Korean beauty products were outselling legacy American brands. And the K-pop music industry was on track to surpass $14 billion in global revenue. But music was still the beating heart of it. And no figure in that music landscape had a trajectory quite like Lisa's. Here is the question this video is going to answer. And it's not the obvious one. The obvious question is, how did a Thai woman become one of the most recognizable performers on the planet? The harder question, the one the industry doesn't want examined too closely, is this. What does her success reveal about how broken the Western music model actually is? And there's a third question, one we'll return to near the end, that is perhaps the most consequential of all. Is what Lisa built actually replicable? Or is she a once-in-a-generation anomaly that the industry will simply wait out? Keep that question in your mind. We'll come back to it. Part 1. The origin story. LALISA Manaban was born in 1997 in Buriram, a province in northeastern Thailand. She started dancing before she could read sheet music. By the time she was a teenager, she was already exceptional. Not just by regional standards, but by any standard. And someone noticed. In 2010, she auditioned for YG Entertainment, one of South Korea's big 3 talent agencies. She was 13 years old. She didn't speak Korean. Think about what that means for a moment. A child from Thailand walks into one of the most competitive entertainment pipelines on Earth, in a language she does not speak, in a culture that is not hers, and she has to convince a room full of executives that she belongs there. She did. She was the only foreign trainee accepted out of 4,000 applicants that year. She trained for 5 years. 5 years of language lessons, vocal coaching, choreography drills, and the particular psychological pressure of the Korean trainee system. A system designed to refine talent through rigorous competition, where trainees can be cut at any point. It is not a gentle process. It rewards the exceptional and discards everyone else. In 2016, BLACKPINK debuted. Lisa was one of 4 members, and almost immediately, something was clear. She was different. Not just because of her technical skill, which was undeniable, but because of her magnetism. The camera found her in a crowd. International audiences responded to her in a way that seemed to transcend the typical K-pop fanbase. By 2021, BLACKPINK had become the most subscribed music act on YouTube in the world. Lisa was the group's center, the dancer, the rapper, the visual, the member whose individual following had begun to rival the group's collective reach. And then she went solo. LALISA dropped in September 2021. The title track accumulated over 73 million YouTube views within the first 24 hours. The companion single Money became one of TikTok's most used audio tracks of the year, not because a label pushed it, not because of radio ads, but because the internet decided it was inescapable. Here's the pattern interrupt that changes how you see everything that comes next. The labels that passed on Lisa, and there were several, didn't pass on her because they thought she was untalented. They passed because they didn't understand the market she was building for. Part 2. The turning point. In 2023, Lisa's contract with YG Entertainment expired. She did not renew. In any other era of the music industry, this moment would have been straightforward. An artist leaves one label, signs with another. The machinery transfers. The machinery continues. That is not what happened. Instead, Lisa founded Loud, her own management and entertainment company. She became, in the most literal sense of the term, her own label, her own executive, her own infrastructure. And the music industry, particularly its Western branch, took notice in a way that went beyond professional curiosity. Because here is what Loud represents. Stripped of all the corporate language, an artist with a documented global fan base in the hundreds of millions, with verified brand partnerships worth 8 and 9 figures, with streaming records that most Western pop stars cannot approach. That artist decided she didn't need the system. Not as a statement, not as a tantrum, as a business decision. To appreciate why that's seismic, you need to understand what a traditional Western record label actually sells. It sells access. Access to distribution networks, to radio programmers, to playlist editors, to the gatekeepers of mainstream visibility. The implicit promise is, sign with us, give us your masters, give us your tour percentage, give us years of exclusivity, and in return, we'll open doors you can't open yourself. Lisa's move forced a question that record labels are desperate to avoid answering: what if an artist doesn't need those doors? Now, contrast two scenarios. A typical Western pop artist releases an album. Their label coordinates a campaign, press junkets, radio servicing, playlist pitching, a headline late-night television appearance. Fans learn about the release from these channels. Consumption is passive. You hear it, you stream it, you move on. A Lisa release event operates differently. In the weeks before a release, fan communities, organized, international, and numbering in the millions, coordinate streaming strategies across every platform simultaneously. They schedule shifts. They monitor charts in real time. They mobilize purchasing campaigns for physical editions, digital albums, merchandise bundles. The release isn't consumed. It's deployed. This is the moment in our story where you should be asking, why? Why do fans engage at that level? And what does it tell us about what Western labels are missing? We have 4 answers, and each one is more damaging than the last. Part 3. The evidence. Reason 1. The streaming arms race. They can't win. Western labels built their streaming strategy around a simple model: create a good song, get it on playlists, accumulate passive streams. It works. It's also increasingly insufficient. K-pop fandoms have turned streaming into a coordinated sport. When a Lisa track drops, fan accounts across Twitter, Discord, Instagram, and fan cafe platforms deploy streaming guides, specific playlists to add the track to, optimal replay timing, strategies for maximizing plays across different regional platforms. The result is streaming numbers that feel almost algorithmic in their precision. The Western industry's response to this has been anxiety, not adaptation. Because the implication is uncomfortable, if streaming can be organized as much as discovered, then the organic discovery model that labels depend on is less valuable than they've claimed. Lisa's releases exposed the gap between what labels sell, reach, and what dedicated fan bases can manufacture without them. LALISA clocked over 73 million YouTube views in 24 hours at the time of its release, without a single American radio station playing it. Reason 2, she built a revenue model that cuts them out. Traditional record labels take a cut of almost every revenue stream an artist generates: recorded music, merchandise, sometimes even touring and brand deals, depending on the contract structure. This model, often called a 360 deal, made financial sense in an era when the label was the only entity capable of building an artist's commercial infrastructure. Lisa's ecosystem operates outside that architecture. Her presence on platforms like Weverse, the K-pop fan engagement super app, allows direct interaction with fans that generates its own revenue through memberships, exclusive content, and digital goods. Photocard culture, a uniquely K-pop phenomenon where physical album purchases include collectible photographic cards of specific members, creates a secondary market economy worth hundreds of millions of dollars globally. And none of that flows through a Western label's accounting department. Record labels sell access. Lisa built her own door. When an artist generates significant income through a direct-to-fan ecosystem that exists entirely outside traditional distribution, the label's leverage collapses. They have nothing to offer that she can't build herself. Reason 3, the markets they ignored, she conquered. Western labels have chronically underinvested in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and much of sub-Saharan Africa. These are regions with massive, young, digitally connected populations, and until recently, the industry treated them as secondary markets, not primary ones. LALISA is Thai. Her fan base reflects that geography in a way no Western artist does. Her fans in Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, India, and across the African continent are not casual listeners. They are among the most organizationally active fan communities in the world. And she built that audience not by targeting it with label-coordinated regional campaigns, but by being from it. The strategic implication is staggering. She unlocked markets worth billions in aggregate without label assistance, using cultural authenticity as her distribution mechanism. No marketing budget engineered that. No regional A&R strategy manufactured it. She simply reflected those audiences back at themselves, and they responded with a loyalty that money genuinely cannot buy. Reason 4. The brand deal empire that makes music almost secondary. By the mid-2020s, LALISA had become the face of Bulgari, a longtime Celine ambassador and a global partner for MAC Cosmetics, among other luxury partnerships. These deals, reportedly worth tens of millions of dollars individually, share one critical characteristic: they are not contingent on a music release cycle. A Western label's ultimate leverage over an artist is the album cycle. Release music through us, let us control the rollout, or you lose visibility. LALISA's brand deal empire means her income and her visibility are not tethered to that cycle. She can be globally present and commercially active with zero label involvement. Consider the Crazy Horse Paris moment. In 2023, LALISA performed a residency at the legendary Parisian Cabaret, a performance that generated enormous controversy and, simultaneously, enormous global attention. Regardless of anyone's opinion of the artistic choice itself, observe what happened commercially. The controversy was absorbed by her brand, processed through her global fan base, and ultimately cemented her status as a cultural figure operating beyond the conventional pop star playbook. No label choreographed that narrative arc. She held it herself. That is a level of brand sovereignty that Western labels are structurally incapable of providing, and terrified of an artist not needing. Part 4. The counter-argument. Now, in fairness, and this story deserves fairness, the Western label perspective is not without logic. The argument made by label executives, often privately, goes something like this. The K-pop model is a specialized, culturally specific phenomenon. The fandom mobilization that powers LALISA's streaming numbers works within a particular cultural ecosystem, one built on parasocial intensity, collectible merchandise culture, and community structures that don't translate wholesale to Western consumer behavior. There's something to that. Radio still matters for mainstream Western chart performance. Awards show presence, the Grammys, the AMAs, the VMAs, still drives cultural legitimacy in the American market. The lobbying infrastructure that gets an artist nominated, the relationships with playlist editors at major DSPs, the PR machine that navigates a controversy. Without losing brand deals, these things require resources and institutional knowledge that an independent artist building from scratch may underestimate. The sustainability question is real. BLACKPINK's members, and LALISA specifically, benefited from years of YG's investment in their training, their early production, and their initial market entry. The platform she launched from was built on label infrastructure. Can that platform be maintained, or even elevated, without similar institutional backing? And there is the longevity argument. K-pop's idol system has a documented shelf life challenge. Careers that burn at extraordinary intensity sometimes burn briefly. Western artists who navigate label systems, imperfect as those systems are, sometimes achieve the multi-decade relevance that independent models have yet to prove they can sustain. These are not trivial concerns. Any serious analysis has to hold them. But here's what the labels are missing. And this is where the story shifts from interesting to genuinely consequential. Part 5. The bigger picture. The labels are missing the fact that LALISA's story is not a K-pop story. It's an infrastructure story. It's a power story. And above all, it's a geography story. For most of the history of the recorded music industry, cultural authority flowed in one direction: west to east, Los Angeles to London to the rest of the world. The American music industry did not set out to be colonial. It simply assumed, as empires often do, that its tastes were universal tastes, and that artists from everywhere else would need to be translated into its language to matter globally. The Korean wave didn't politely ask for permission to disrupt that assumption. Neither did Lisa. When BTS stood at the United Nations General Assembly, it wasn't a music moment. It was a geopolitical one. When Parasite became the first non-English language film to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, it didn't just change the Oscars. It changed what the world believes is possible from non-Western creators. Lisa's solo career sits inside that same seismic shift. But she goes further because she doesn't just represent Korean cultural export. She represents something even more radical. A Southeast Asian woman who used Korean industry infrastructure as a launchpad, then transcended it to build something that belongs to no single national entertainment tradition. She is the logical conclusion of globalization that the music industry spent decades hoping would arrive on its own terms. And here is the moment that reframes everything you've watched in this video. Western record labels are not terrified of Lisa specifically. They're terrified of what she proves, that the machinery they built, the gatekeeping, the advanced system, the 360 deal, the curated scarcity of mainstream radio access, is optional. Not diminishing, not evolving. Optional. Every young artist in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Nigeria, in Brazil, in the Philippines, watching Lisa's trajectory is doing the same calculation. If she could build that, without English as a first language, without Western label backing, without proximity to Los Angeles or London, what exactly is the label offering me that I can't build myself? That question, multiplied across hundreds of millions of young creatives in markets the Western music industry has chronically undervalued, is an existential one. Is the Western music industry model dying? No, not yet. But it is losing its monopoly on what it means to be a global music star. And Lisa didn't break that monopoly through protest or disruption for its own sake. She broke it by being undeniable. In the end, the most dangerous thing an artist can do to a label isn't leave. It's succeed after leaving. Here's the sentence that summarizes everything you just watched. Lisa didn't beat the Western music industry at its own game. She changed the game so fundamentally that their scoreboard became irrelevant. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. Now, I want to hear from you, and I mean this genuinely, not as a formality. Do you think what Lisa has built is replicable? Or is she a singular talent in a singular cultural moment that the industry will ultimately absorb and move past? Tell me in the comments. I read them. If this story resonated with you, if you want to understand not just what Lisa did, but why the entire K-pop business model is about to force a reckoning with how Western entertainment thinks about ownership, fandom, and global audiences, there's one more video you need to watch next. The story gets more complicated from here.